Commander Alan Wright stood at the viewport of the Earth expeditionary vessel Horizon watching the stars. His ship hung in space near the massive Galactic Council station. The station looked like a metal flower with many petals, each one housing a different alien species. "Commander, the Council requests your presence again," said Lieutenant Samantha Powell. Her voice was tight with worry. Wright sighed and straightened his uniform. 3 days of talks, and still the Council acted like humans might attack at any moment. "Any idea what they want this time?" he asked. "They're still debating our membership status," Powell said. "Dr. Martinez is already there. She says it's not going well." Wright nodded and headed to the shuttle bay. The small craft carried him across the void to the station. Inside, the air smelled strange. A mix of gases adjusted to suit many different life forms. Some areas were hot, others cold. Some were bright, others dim. The Galactic Council had created spaces where all could survive, if not comfortably. In the main chamber, representatives from 12 species sat in a half-circle. They fell silent when Wright entered. He spotted Dr. Olivia Martinez, the ship's xenobiologist, standing alone at a display terminal. "Commander Wright," said Counselor Zix, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms, "we were just discussing the unusual nature of your species." Wright stood straight. "I'm not sure what you mean, Counselor." A low, rumbling voice came from a tank of greenish liquid where Counselor Thal, a water-dwelling creature, floated. "Your people come from a death world. This is concerning." "A death world?" Wright asked. "I don't understand the term." Martinez stepped forward. She was the best xenobiologist Earth had, which was why she was on this mission. "They classify planets by how dangerous they are to life," she explained quietly. "They're saying Earth is extremely dangerous." Wright looked confused. "Compared to what?" A thin bird-like alien named Vost clicked its beak. "Your gravity would crush many of us. Your oxygen levels are toxic to some. Your temperature range is extreme. Your wildlife is aggressive. Your microbes are numerous and adaptive." "But that's just normal," Wright said. "Every planet has challenges." "Not like yours," said Zix. "We have analyzed your biology. You have redundant organs. Your bones can repair themselves. You can survive losing large amounts of blood. You can eat almost anything. You can live in temperatures that would kill most species." Wright looked around the room, seeing fear in alien eyes, postures, and gestures. "We are willing to grant humans membership," said Thal, "but with restrictions. You must agree to limited numbers on council stations and ships. You must wear identification markers. You must accept monitoring." Wright felt his face grow hot. "You're treating us like we're dangerous animals." "Are you not?" asked Vost. "Your history is full of violence." Martinez touched Wright's arm. "Commander, I've been reviewing the data they shared with me." She pointed to her tablet. "Every species here evolved on what they call challenging worlds, but Earth is classified as an extreme death world. It's the only one in that category." Wright stared at the information. Each alien species had adapted to specific harsh conditions: high gravity, toxic atmosphere, extreme temperatures, radiation. But humans had adapted to all these challenges at moderate levels. "I don't understand," Wright said. "If all of you come from dangerous worlds, why are we singled out?" An older alien, skin like wrinkled leather, leaned forward. "Because, Commander, you did not just survive your world. You conquered it, and species that conquer death worlds do not stop there." Martinez studied her tablet. "There's something here that doesn't add up. The comparative planetary data seems selectively presented." Wright looked at the worried faces of the council members. "We came in peace. We still come in peace." "That remains to be seen," said Zix. "The council will vote tomorrow on your membership conditions." As Wright and Martinez left the chamber, she whispered, "Commander, I need to show you something. The data they're sharing about other worlds. I think they're hiding something important." Wright nodded. Find out what it is, Doctor. Our future in the stars may depend on it. Lieutenant John Carter followed Dr. Martinez through the crowded hallway of the Council's science wing. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved around them, some floating, others crawling, a few rolling on specialized equipment. All of them gave the two humans extra space. They act like we have some disease, Carter said quietly. In a way, they think we do, Martinez replied. Our biology scares them. They entered a large round room where dozens of scientists from different species gathered in groups. Displays showed charts, planetary images, and biological data. This was the multi-species scientific conference that Martinez had pushed for them to attend. Remember, Martinez whispered, we're here to learn, not to scare anyone. Carter nodded. He was a tall, strong man with dark skin and short black hair. Next to the thin, frail-looking aliens called the Y3, he looked like a giant. A silicon-based being approached them. It moved slowly, its rocky body making soft, grinding sounds. This was a Vectal, a species from a high-gravity world. Dr. Martinez, the Vectal said, its voice coming from a translator device. I am Scientist Krell. I have studied your species biology. Most interesting. Thank you for meeting with us, Martinez said. This is Lieutenant Carter. Carter extended his hand, then remembered that not all species shook hands. He pulled back awkwardly. You move so quickly, Krell observed. On my world, such rapid movement requires great energy. It's normal for us, Carter said. Normal, Krell repeated. Your normal would kill many species. Your bone density alone would make you sink in many environments. At the other side of the room, a group of methane-breathing Erosi floated in their special environment suits. They resembled large jellyfish with multiple tendrils. One of them drifted over. Humans, the Erosi said, its voice tinny through its translator. You survive temperature ranges that would freeze or boil our kind. How do you not die when your world shifts from hot to cold? We adapt, Martinez explained. We wear different clothes. We build shelters. But your bodies, the Erosi insisted. They remain functional across a 40-degree temperature range. It is unnatural. Carter looked around the room. Everyone here seems afraid of something different about us. Martinez nodded. Each species evolved to handle specific challenges on their world. The Vectal adapted to high gravity with silicon-based bodies. The Erosi adapted to gas giants with methane atmospheres. But humans, we adapted to a bit of everything, Carter finished. Suddenly, a loud alarm sounded. Red lights flashed. A computerized voice spoke in multiple languages. Environmental system failure. Pressure dropping in Section 12. All beings please compensate or evacuate. The room erupted in panic. The Erosi's tendrils flailed wildly. The Vectal moved as fast as its heavy body allowed, which wasn't very fast at all. Other species rushed for exits or emergency equipment. What's happening? Carter asked, feeling only a slight pop in his ears. The air pressure is dropping, Martinez said, checking her tablet. Down about 15%. For us, it's nothing serious. A small six-legged being called a Florian had fallen in the rush. No one stopped to help it. Carter moved quickly to its side. Are you okay? He asked, kneeling beside the plant-like alien. The Florian's leaves trembled. Cannot move. In low pressure, it whispered. Without thinking, Carter lifted the Florian. It weighed almost nothing to him. He carried it toward the emergency area, where other Florians gathered with special pressure suits. When he returned, he found Martinez talking with a group of council scientists who were watching him with wide eyes, or their species equivalent. What? Carter asked. You just carried a Florian with one arm, Martinez said quietly. They come from a high-pressure world. On their planet, they weigh 8 times what they do here. It felt light to me, Carter said, confused. An older alien with gray skin and 4 eyes approached them. You didn't even use mechanical assistance, it said. You didn't need breathing support during the pressure drop. You moved at full speed while others were slowed. Martinez looked at the alien scientists gathered around them. This is what we've been trying to explain. What's extreme for you is often just inconvenient for us. Then the rumors are true, the four-eyed alien said. Humans really are the apex Deathworlders. As the emergency ended and systems returned to normal, Carter noticed how the other species now looked at them, with even more fear than before. I think we just made things worse, he whispered to Martinez. Maybe, she replied. Or maybe they finally understand what we've been trying to tell them. Admiral Susan Hayes stood before the council, her back straight and her face calm. She was older than Wright and Martinez, with gray streaks in her short brown hair. She had spent 30 years in space and knew how to handle difficult situations. Council members, she said, I have a proposal that may help us all understand each other better. The 12 alien representatives watched her with caution. The past week had been filled with tense meetings and growing fear about humans. We seem to be at a standstill. Hayes continued. You fear us because of our world and our biology. We cannot change what we are. Councillor Zix leaned forward. What do you propose, Admiral? A challenge, Hayes said. A survival test on a neutral, uninhabited planet. One representative from each species, living together, solving problems. This will show you how humans really behave. Murmurs filled the chamber. The oldest council member, a Morrigan named Elder Tholos, raised a hand for silence. The Morrigan were one of the first species to join the council. They looked almost human except for their purple skin and 6 fingers on each hand. An interesting suggestion, Tholos said. His voice was smooth and calm. But how would this prove anything? Each species has different needs. That's exactly the point, Hayes explained. In real situations, we must work together despite our differences. This challenge will show how humans cooperate with other species. The council members spoke among themselves in low voices. Finally, Zix addressed Hayes again. We accept this challenge. The Morrigan will design the test planet and conditions, as they have the most experience with multi-species affairs. Hayes nodded, not seeing the small smile on Tholos' face. Back on the Horizon Asterisk, Hayes met with Commander Wright and Dr. Martinez in the ship's conference room. They accepted too quickly, Wright said, pacing the room. They're planning something. Of course they are, Hayes agreed. But we need to break this cycle of fear. This challenge is our chance to show them humans aren't the monsters they think we are. Who will you send? Martinez asked. I'm going myself, Hayes said, along with botanist Dr. Peter Garcia and security officer Lisa Miller. Martinez frowned. That's a diverse team. Exactly, Hayes said. We need to show different human strengths. Garcia understands plants and ecosystems. Miller is trained for security and survival. And I have diplomatic experience. Wright looked concerned. The Morrigan are designing the planet. They could make it impossible for humans to survive. I've thought of that, Hayes said. Martinez, I need you to analyze everything they tell us about this planet. Find any tricks or traps they might be setting. 2 days later, Martinez called an urgent meeting. Her face was serious as she displayed images of the challenge planet. They're definitely trying to stack the deck against us, she said. The challenge zone for humans has 30% higher gravity than Earth. Temperature swings from very hot to very cold each day. Water sources are limited. The air has less oxygen than we're used to. And the other species? Wright asked. Their zones are challenging but suited to their biology. Martinez explained. The Erosi zone has plenty of methane. The Vectal zone has stable temperatures. Everyone gets conditions that are difficult but manageable for their species. Except us, Hayes said. Exactly. They've designed our zone to push human limits. I don't think they expected us to accept the challenge. Hayes studied the planet data. Can we survive there? Yes, Martinez said. It will be hard, but possible. You'll need special equipment and careful planning. Good, Hayes said, because I think that's what they're afraid of, that we can survive conditions that would kill other species. There's more, Martinez added. The Morrigan are making this a public event. The entire galactic community will be watching. So that's their game, Wright said. If we fail, humans look weak. If we succeed through aggression, we look dangerous. Then we'll have to succeed by helping others, Hayes said. That's the one outcome they aren't planning for. As the team prepared for departure, news arrived that the challenge had been named 12 Worlds, 1 Sky, and would begin in 3 days. The Morrigan's trap was set, but Hayes was determined not to play by their rules. Officer Lisa Miller felt the heavy gravity pull at her body as she stepped onto the challenge planet. The air was thin, making her breathe harder than normal. The sun beat down with intense heat, but she knew when night came, it would be bitterly cold. Spread out, Hayes ordered. Garcia, check for edible plants. Miller, secure the perimeter. Hayes had chosen a small valley near a rocky outcrop for their base camp. All around them, red dust stretched toward distant mountains. The sky was a strange yellow color. Miller checked her equipment. Each team had been given basic survival tools: a knife, fire starter, water purifier, and communication device that only worked for emergency evacuation. Everything else they had to find or make themselves. The gravity is going to make everything harder, Miller said. She was young, strong, and trained for tough situations, but even she felt the strain. We'll adapt, Hayes said simply. That's what humans do. Garcia returned with a handful of small, tough plants. These are similar to desert plants from Earth, he said. They store water. We can extract it if we need to. As the day progressed, they built a simple shelter against the rock face. The work was exhausting in the heavy gravity. Their muscles ached, and they drank water sparingly. When night fell, the temperature dropped quickly. They huddled in their shelter, using body heat to stay warm. 12 days, Hayes said. That's how long we need to survive here. I wonder how the others are doing, Garcia said. Miller stood up. I'm going to check. That's not part of the challenge, Hayes warned. We make our own rules, Miller replied. You said we'd succeed by helping others. Using the cover of darkness, Miller climbed the rocky outcrop. From the top, she could see far across the planet's surface. In the distance, she spotted lights from other camps. She took out a small device Dr. Martinez had given her secretly, a scanner that could detect life forms and basic environmental conditions. It showed 12 separate camps spread across different terrain types, some in forests, others near water, one on a flat plain. The scanner picked up movement near the Erosi camp. Something large was approaching them. The Erosi were peaceful beings, not fighters. They wouldn't stand a chance against predators. Miller hesitated. Hayes had told them to focus on their own survival, but letting others get hurt felt wrong. She made her decision quickly. Climbing down, she grabbed her knife and a makeshift torch. Where are you going? Hayes asked when Miller returned to camp for supplies. The Erosi are in trouble. Something's hunting them. Hayes frowned. This isn't our problem. Yes, it is, Miller said firmly. If we only care about ourselves, we're exactly what they fear we are. Hayes was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Go, but be careful. Miller ran across the dusty landscape. The heavy gravity made her legs burn, but she pushed on. Her lungs worked hard in the thin air. A normal human would be exhausted, but Miller's training kept her moving. When she reached the Erosi camp, she found chaos. 3 large, wolf-like creatures with 6 legs were circling the frightened aliens. The Erosi floated in their protective suits, their tendrils waving in panic. Hey, Miller shouted, waving her torch. The creatures turned toward her, their green eyes reflecting the firelight. She stood her ground as one charge. At the last second, she dodged aside and slashed with her knife. The creature howled and backed away. For 10 minutes, Miller fought off the predators until they finally retreated. She stood breathing heavily, cut and bruised but alive. The Erosi approached cautiously. "You fought them off," one said through its translator. "Why did you help us?" "Because you needed help," Miller said simply. "But you risked your life. Your challenge is to survive, not to save others." Miller wiped blood from a cut on her arm. "Where I come from, helping others is part of survival." As she walked back to her camp, Miller didn't see the small drone that had recorded everything. Across the galaxy, millions watched as a human from the feared Deathworld used her strength not to conquer, but to protect. And in their monitoring station, the Morrigan looked at each other with concern. This was not how humans were supposed to behave. Dr. Peter Garcia knelt beside a strange group of plants. They grew in a perfect circle, their stems all leaning toward the center. In his 20 years as a botanist, he had never seen anything like this. "These aren't natural," he said to Hayes, who stood watching the horizon. "They've been planted this way." Hayes frowned. "By who? We're supposed to be alone on this planet." It was the 5th day of the challenge. After Miller's rescue of the Erosi, their camp had been quiet. The other species stayed in their assigned zones, struggling with their own challenges. "I don't know," Garcia said, "but these plants are all pointing to something." He followed the direction of the leaning stems. They led toward a small mountain about 2 miles away. "I need to check it out," Garcia said. Hayes looked worried. "It could be a trap. Or it could be important," Garcia replied. "I'll be careful." Hayes finally nodded. "Take Miller with you." The two humans walked across the dusty plain toward the mountain. The heavy gravity made each step difficult. Sweat poured down their faces in the hot sun. "Miller," Garcia said as they walked, "what you did for the Erosi was brave." Miller shrugged. "It was right. That's all." When they reached the mountain, Garcia examined the base carefully. "Look here," he said, pointing to a crack in the rock. "Air is flowing out." "A cave?" Miller asked. "Maybe something more," Garcia said. He squeezed through the crack, Miller following close behind. Inside, they found a tunnel leading deep into the mountain. The walls were smooth, clearly not natural. As they moved deeper, they found lights that turned on automatically. "This is a building," Miller whispered, "built into the mountain." The tunnel ended at a large metal door. Beside it was a control panel with strange symbols. "Can you open it?" Miller asked. Garcia studied the panel. "These symbols look like old Morrigan writing. Martinez showed me some examples." He pressed several symbols. The door slid open with a hiss. Beyond was a large room filled with computer screens and strange equipment. The screens showed images of all 12 teams in the challenge. "They're watching us," Miller said. "But why here?" "The Council has monitoring stations in orbit." Garcia moved to a computer terminal. "This place is old," he said. "Look at the dust. It's been here a long time." He pressed buttons on the terminal. The screens changed to show star maps and images of different planets. "This isn't just about the challenge," Garcia said slowly. "This is something bigger." One screen showed Earth, with detailed information about humans written in Morrigan language. "I can't read all of this," Garcia said, "but I recognize some words. Dangerous, threat, control." Miller looked at other screens. "There are files on every species in the Council, dating back hundreds of years." Garcia found an old storage device and connected it to the terminal. "I'm copying what I can. Hayes needs to see this." Suddenly, an alarm sounded. Red lights flashed along the walls. "We need to go," Miller said urgently. They hurried back through the tunnel. As they reached the entrance, they heard the sound of a ship landing nearby. "Hide," Miller whispered, pulling Garcia behind a large rock. A small craft landed 50 yards away. The door opened, and 3 Morrigans stepped out. They moved quickly to the mountain entrance and disappeared inside. "What are they doing here?" Garcia asked quietly. "Nothing good," Miller replied. "We need to tell Hayes what we found." They waited until the Morrigan were inside, then ran back toward their camp. The heavy gravity made running painful, but fear pushed them on. At the same time, aboard the Horizon Commander Wright received a coded message from one of his officers who had been monitoring all communications about the challenge. "Sir," the officer said, "I've intercepted some strange messages between the Morrigan on the Council. They're talking about contingency plans if the humans show too much success in the challenge." Wright's face hardened. "What kind of contingency plans?" "They're not specific, sir, but one phrase keeps appearing. The humans must not discover the truth." "What truth?" Wright wondered aloud. "Send a warning to Admiral Hayes immediately. Tell her to be on guard." The message was sent, but on the challenge planet, a storm was building. A storm that would block all communications between the surface and orbit. And in their secret facility, the Morrigan were activating systems that had lain dormant for centuries. Admiral Hayes looked at the storage device Garcia had brought back. The storm outside their shelter howled with fierce winds and stinging sand. Their communication device could not reach the Horizon through the interference. "So the Morrigan have been watching all species for centuries," Hayes said. "But why?" "Control," Garcia said. "The data shows they've been playing species against each other, creating fear and distrust." Miller stood at the entrance of their shelter, watching for danger. "They're especially worried about humans. The files had more information on us than any other species." Hayes nodded slowly. "We're unpredictable to them. We're physically stronger than many species, but we don't use that strength the way they expect." Garcia pointed to his notes. "The facility had planetary data too, and something doesn't add up. Each Council species homeworld has at least one environmental factor more extreme than Earth's." "What?" Hayes asked, surprised. "Yes, the Vectals world has higher gravity. The Eroses has more toxic gases. The Florians has higher pressure. But the Morrigan only show data that makes Earth look uniquely dangerous." Hayes was quiet for a moment. "They've been lying to everyone." A loud crash outside made them all jump. Miller looked out. "The storm is getting worse, and I think I saw something moving out there." Hayes made a decision. "We need to warn the other species. The Morrigan are manipulating all of us." "How?" Miller asked. "We can't reach our ship, and the other camps are far away." "We go to them," Hayes said firmly. "One by one if necessary." Garcia looked worried. "In this storm, it's dangerous." "More dangerous than letting the Morrigan continue their lies?" Hayes asked. Before they could leave, they heard a voice calling from outside. Miller looked out cautiously. "It's a Florian," she said. "And they're not alone." Hayes joined her at the entrance. Through the swirling sand, she saw 3 figures struggling toward their camp. A Florian, an Erosi, and a small E3. Miller ran out to help them. The wind nearly knocked her down, but she pushed forward. She reached the aliens and helped guide them to the shelter. Once inside, the Florian spoke through its translator. "We were attacked. Strange machines came to our camps. They destroyed our shelters and supplies." "The same happened to us," the Y3 added, its bird-like voice high and frightened. "We saw your camp from the high ground and came for help." Hayes looked at Garcia, who nodded grimly. "The Morrigan are making sure no one succeeds." "Why would they do that?" the Erosi asked, its tendrils waving in distress. "Because they fear what would happen if we all worked together," Hayes explained. She showed them the data Garcia had found. The 3 aliens were silent as they understood the truth. "They've been lying to all of us," the Florian said finally, "making us fear each other." "Especially humans," the Erosi added, looking at Hayes with its large eyes. "But when we were in danger, it was your officer who helped us." More voices called from outside. Miller looked out again. "More aliens are coming. I see a Vectal and 2 others I don't recognize." Within an hour, representatives from 9 species had gathered in the human shelter. All had similar stories of attacks on their camps. The only ones missing were the Morrigan, who had their own camp somewhere on the planet. Hayes stood before the gathered aliens. Though many of them had feared humans just days ago, now they looked to her for leadership. "The Morrigan want us to fight each other over resources," Hayes said. "They want us to prove that different species cannot work together. We must show them they're wrong." "How?" asked the Vectal. "We cannot survive in the same environments. We have different needs." "That's exactly why we need each other," Hayes replied. "Each of us has different strengths. The Florians can find water in plants. The Vectal can move heavy objects. The Erosi can detect changes in air composition." "And humans?" the Y3 asked. Hayes smiled. "We're adaptable. We can help each of you with your specific needs while coordinating our efforts." As the storm raged outside, the most unlikely alliance in galactic history began to form. Species that had been taught to fear each other now shared resources and knowledge. None of them saw the drone hovering silently in the corner of the shelter, transmitting everything to the Morrigan facility in the mountain. The ground shook violently, throwing Hayes against the wall of their shelter. Outside, the storm had stopped, but now earthquakes rocked the planet's surface. "The Morrigan are changing the game again," Garcia said, helping Hayes to her feet. "They're making the planet itself attack us." The alliance of species had survived 3 days together. Working as one group, they had built a larger shelter, found food and water for all, and protected each other from dangers. Now, as the ground continued to shake, they looked to Hayes once more. "We need to evacuate," she said. "This is no longer a challenge. It's a trap." The Vectal, who had become Hayes' friend, shook its rocky head. "Our emergency beacons are not working. The satellites do not respond." Miller checked their human beacon. "Ours is dead too. Something is blocking the signal." "The facility in the mountain," Garcia said suddenly. "It must have communication equipment, strong enough to cut through whatever is blocking us." Hayes nodded. "Then that's where we go." As they left the shelter, they saw smoke rising from the mountain. Bright lights flashed around its peak. The ground continued to shake, opening cracks in the red soil. The journey was difficult. The Florians, adapted to high pressure, struggled to move in the thin air. The Y3, with their bird-like bodies, could not handle the heavy gravity. Humans and Vectal took turns carrying the smaller aliens. When they reached the mountain, they found the entrance guarded by large machines. Metal robots with weapons stood on each side of the door. "Those must be what attacked our camps," the Erosi said. Miller studied the robots. "They look old. Ancient technology. How do we get past them?" the Y3 asked, its voice trembling. Hayes looked at the diverse group around her. Beings from different worlds, with different bodies and skills. Then she smiled. "Together," she said, "each of us has strengths the robots aren't designed for." Their plan was simple but effective. The Vectal, immune to electrical shocks, approached first. As the robots fired, the Vectal absorbed the electricity. The Erosi released gas from their suits, surrounding the robots in a cloud that confused their sensors. Miller and Hayes ran forward in the confusion. Their human speed and strength let them reach the robots before they could adjust. Together, they pushed the machines over. On the ground, the robots could not right themselves. "Now," Hayes called. Garcia pressed the symbols on the door panel. It slid open, and they all rushed inside. In the main room of the facility, they found 3 Morrigan working frantically at control panels. The screens showed the planet's surface breaking apart. "Stop this," Hayes demanded. "You're going to kill everyone, including yourselves." The lead Morrigan turned. It was Elder Thelos from the Council. "This challenge was never meant to be survived," he said coldly. "Not once we saw what was happening. Species working together, learning the truth about us. This cannot be allowed." "Why?" Hayes asked. "Why do you fear cooperation?" "Because united you could challenge us," Thelos said. "For thousands of years, the Morrigan have guided the galaxy. We keep species separate, fearful of each other, It is the only way to maintain order. The Vectal stepped forward. You mean control. You wanted us afraid so we would never question you. Thelos smiled thinly. And it worked. Until humans came. You didn't follow the rules. You helped others instead of fighting for yourselves. He pointed at Hayes. Your kind is dangerous not because you are strong, but because you show others how to be strong together. Garcia moved to a different control panel. I can stop the destruction, he said, but I need help. The Erosi floated to his side, using its tendrils to work multiple controls at once. The Ythri, with its sharp eyes, spotted patterns in the data that others missed. Working together, they managed to stabilize the planet. Then Garcia found the communication system and sent a distress signal to all ships in orbit. As alarms blared, Thelos looked at the united group with hatred and fear. You've ruined everything, he said to Hayes. Hours later, rescue ships arrived. The challenge participants were evacuated safely. The Morian were taken into custody by the Council. In the Council chamber days later, representatives from all species gathered. For the first time, they did not sit separated by species, but mixed together. Today, we propose a new alliance, she said, not built on fear, but on understanding. We come from different worlds, but we share the same sky. We are all Deathworlders. And together, we are stronger than alone. As the Council voted unanimously to form the Deathworlder Alliance, Hayes smiled. Humans weren't the scariest species in the galaxy. They were simply the first to show that working together was better than standing alone.